Hi, good afternoon, or hello. This is Glenn Maurer, and I'm here today for another episode of The Next Step, a show that we do every couple weeks, broadcast on Cable 17 in Santa Barbara, and also available on YouTube and Ustream. You can Google The Next Step TVSB and get either Ustream or YouTube, and watch the programs that have been streamed live, streamed after the show has been conducted live. If you're interested in this show or want to have a friend see it, or you want to see some of the previous shows we've done, and we've done quite a few over the last couple of years. Today, we're going to talk about a subject of topical interest in the news media for the last few weeks, which is just after the President Obama has addressed Congress with his State of the Union speech and has presented to the public and to Congress a budget proposal for the upcoming year. And I think it's, we all know there's a disunion between the Democratic members of Congress and the President versus the Republican majority. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk a bit about how that is going to potentially play out in the next 2 years. And in order to give another side of this, I've asked Hap Ziegler on the show, and Hap is a longtime Democratic activist, I think it's fair to say, of a progressive kind, the kind of Democrat that I would be if I were still a Democrat and not a Green Party idealist. Be that as it may, I still support and believe in much of the things that progressive Democrats believe in. So what we had here, Hap, welcome.
Thank you.
What we have is a presentation by President Obama in the State of the Union speech that I think most people on our political side of the aisle, yours and mine, would find appealing, and yet, and I'm certain it would make his supporters happy. But many are noting that it's not likely to get enacted in any really great way. What part of his speech, Hap, did you find most encouraging as a Democrat and a supporter of these kind of progressive ideas?
Well, I kind of lumped it into two categories. One had to do with foreign relations, which I can briefly go over if you'd like. And then the other one had to do more with the economy, jobs, and the middle class. So do you want me to take a quick look over the foreign?
Make a quick checklist of the foreigns, but I think the issue, I think that most domestic politics is going to focus on perhaps the economic questions.
Okay. His foreign policy is, first of all, not leading with the military, which I think is absolutely strategic, and particularly in the Middle East. He talks about coalitions and diplomacy. He talks about terrorists. He doesn't use the word Muslim or Islam terrorist. We don't use the term Christian or Catholic terrorist when somebody shoots somebody in front of a family planning place. So I think that he's taking all the right steps there. He's asking for authorization, kind of wide authorization against ISIS. That scares me a little bit. I think I don't want to see us get into another Vietnam, and who knows what might happen if he had that authority. He's talked about thwarting cyber crimes and cyber terror. That is domestic as well as international, but international tends to be more pervasive. He talked about effective ways to fight pandemics, and of course he talked about climate change. I noted that it was rather funny that the speaker, Mr. Bono, couldn't even clap when he talked about climate change.
I noticed that too.
Anyway, on the other side, more the domestic things, he went over, of course, some of the accomplishments. 1.2 million private sector jobs, 58 months of growth, 165,000 fewer troops overseas, more people graduating than ever before, more people insured. We've become free of the grip of foreign oil. And at the same time, of course, he took some credit for the reduction in oil prices, which offended some people. But having been around when he was first elected and the prices shot up, it was all his fault.
That's true.
Every right-wing email said it was all his fault. And of course, when the prices fell to below what they were when he came into office, he gets no credit by the right wing. Interesting. So some of the ththings he talked about that I thought were interesting is he did get one minimum wage package through during his term. He would like another one, take it up to $15 an hour. I think that's impressive. The current, I thought an interesting thing, he mentioned a current minimum wage means that they're making 20% less in real dollars than the minimum wage that was in effect during Reagan's period.
I thought it was a greater difference than that, but yes. It's
Well, that's what he said. I didn't check his
it's a
facts.
substantial difference, yes.
I also thought it was funny that he did refer to Reagan a couple times.
Well, they like to do that, don't they?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
He's talking about building the infrastructure, and he wants to do that with bringing back some of the money that has flown overseas to other jurisdictions.
Corporate tax, corporate taking of profits and depositing them in more favored tax systems
Right.
outside the domestic country.
Technically earning them over there and
Well, I
leaving them there,
understand,
yeah. Interesting numbers here, if you want to get just 65% of our federal roads need work, 24% of the bridges, 45% of the population has lack of public transportation and transit. He's talking about job for vets. Just jump in here if you want to talk about any one of these.
Well, I wanted to, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, okay, I think the community college tuition,
Yeah.
taking that down to zero
Well,
is
I guess here's
coming.
here's what I want to more overarchingly question,
ahead.
ask you. The speech proposed, and his budget proposed, I think, a $3.999 trillion budget, which is just a smidge under, but with a very populist, progressive message.
I'm sorry, I misspoke.
That was
What's
the budget, yeah.
Nothing else.
So a lot of these things that he proposed, for example, a tax on inherited wealth, raising the income tax on the wealthiest, new taxes on the large financial firms in Wall Street, raising capital gains rates, taxing corporations on overseas income. All these things, which I, as a left of center person and a progressive and favor, are now being proposed in face of maybe a 2/3 opposition Congress. Why? How does the Democratic Party and how does President Obama explain why none of this was accomplished, or very little of this was accomplished, when he had a Congress that was supportive? I mean, a lot of people are feeling a little cynical about the speech. It feels like it's another one of those great speeches that President Obama can give, showing that he understands the issue. He understands where the public opinion is, and the great American opinion is, of raising the minimum wage and fair taxes, getting rid of these favorite tax treatments for the wealthy, stopping the disparity, increasing disparity between the middle class and the very, 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 very wealthy. So how is it that this can be accomplished, or to be maybe pugnacious a bit, is this just another one of these bait and switch things, or is it a way of just making sure the public knows, make the public fearful that if they give the Republicans the presidency in 2 years, it'll even be worse?
That's a long question.
It is a long question. Take any part of it you can remember.
My reaction is that I think we would have almost unanimous consent that Obama squandered the power he had on the election of 2008 and coming into power in 2009. I think his speech is still the same optimism, as you commented on, that he gave both before, during, and after the first election. I think he's setting the stage for 2016.
And cynics would say, if I might interrupt just momentarily,
Sure.
cynics would say that's really what this is all about. These proposals that the great majority, a large majority of the American population support, just as they supported, for example, single-pay health care. These things that we can poll, the pollsters can tell us what the public supports, if he gets out there now and advocates them knowing that he can't accomplish them, is it just a way of making the other side look bad?
I think that is absolutely one of the reasons. I think the fact that he has espoused almost all of these, almost using the same words, for the last 8 years, counting when he was leading up to running for president. So I don't think there's been a change of his words. Will there be
No.
a change of his deeds? I think not. I think that when he had the power, or at least appeared to have the power, with Democrats like Ben Nelson and Landry down in Louisiana, I'm not sure how much power he really had when he had the Democratic majority. But I think he's saying the same things, so he's true to his word. I think he's putting more emphasis on it now, because if it doesn't get done, it is easy, and I might add, appropriate, to lay that failure on the lap of the Republicans.
Yeah,
And so I think that's the staging that he was doing during that speech.
which again brings me back to my sort of cynical suspicion that neither political party is too much in favor of accomplishing any of their larger goals, the ones that they give out to their supporters, you know, the red meat that goes to their people. But they do want to have promises of that, promises that we might someday reach the promised land. We might someday have a fair tax system that, or medical care or schools that all of us are able to attend, or infrastructure reform, or better jobs, so there are better manufacturing jobs. And yet there are some core issues that the Democrats and Republicans behind these populist rhetorics seem more likely to agree on. And one of the things that you and I have talked about before in that category, I would say, is the trade arrangements, the free trade pacts. They call them free trade pacts, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the other ones where, in the commonality of Republicans and Democratic support for some of these proposals, is more a commonality of moneyed interest support that supports both the Democrats and Republicans who support them, if that made any sense.
Well, I would say it just maybe a little differently, maybe saying the same thing. I think there, for instance, whether Social Security should continue, whether Medicare should be available in some form to all, the polls all say, when they take the polls of the voters in the United States, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats all want that. Yep. So there's a commonality in those issues. The interesting thing, there's a commonality in Congress. The irony or the sadness is the commonality is completely opposite what the voters want. Look at ACA, Obamacare. There was strong support for single payer, strong support for reform, and the Democrats were as hard to get in line as well, not as hard, but
just about.
Many of them were as hard to get in line as the Republicans to get the thing passed. So it's really the citizens of the United States versus Congress.
Versus their elected representatives.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's why I'm wondering if it's all kabuki dance or theater or something where you have shadows on the wall, but each side plays that role, scares the other side or encourages their side, but they never seem to be able to actually accomplish the implementation of the things that we know the public is generally supportive of, like you just mentioned, Social Security, and Medicare. The survey polls that we were looking at earlier, 60-70% of the Republicans and 70% and more of the Democrats support no changes in Social Security or even extensions of Social Security and Medicare and these programs. And yet there's not a session that goes by in Congress when somebody from one side or another doesn't offer a threat to that program.
As is happening this week. They're discussing changes to limit Social Security.
So are we silly to become overwrought when such changes are proposed? knowing that it's unlikely that it'll actually completely be implemented, and it's more of a distraction to get us off of attention to other things that will happen?
Couple comments. First, I would hope that our leaders do continue to talk like this, because if they talk the way the actions actually occur, won't that be a dismal, dark time? The second thing is, some good things happen. Of course, Obamacare isn't perfect. ACA, affordable health. And Social Security wasn't perfect when Frank Roosevelt.
Well, it's not perfect to the
Franklin
state,
Roosevelt.
but it's critically important.
But he laid a foundation stone there, and I think it would be political suicide if the Republicans try to do what they're doing in the House. They know that nothing's going to happen because the Senate probably won't go along with them, even with its majority Republicans, and the president's going to veto it. So they're doing, I mean, there's no question it's kabuki in the Republican-controlled House. I mean, it's not even a question. If those Republicans could get what they wanted, they have no alternative for the 11 or 12 million people who would suddenly lose insurance.
Well, they just proposed the alternative to the Affordable Care Act, which is essentially like the Affordable Care Act, but just smaller. I mean, they reduced the payouts and the coverage, but it's the same kind of program. It wasn't like they did any transformational proposal.
Right.
They didn't, so I mean, that's
So if that doesn't confirm kabuki, then I guess
yeah,
there's nothing I can offer.
they had to offer something.
Right.
So what they offered was something that looks just a lot like what we have now, only maybe 70 or 80% of the care. I mean, it limits the amount of coverage people can get and things like that. But so if that's all we're talking about is this kind of 10 or 20%, 30% differences, then I don't think people are, I think people are then being misled when they hear speeches which sound like the choices are so more polarized.
Correct.
So we have, what things would the Democrats and the Republicans, do you imagine, if you imagine any agreement in the current term of Congress, what sort of things might they agree on?
Boy, I feel uncomfortable even trying to come up with an answer. I think that many polls have showed an agreement on some very large issues, and we talked about them. Social Security, Medicare, transparency of government, NSA, surveillance. Republicans and Democrats are, by large numbers, in agreement. Not so in Congress. And so, how does one predict Congress? I mean, do we just go around and count up how much money goes into their political action committees, and then we can decide what's going to happen? I mean, that's almost how I feel. Democrats more or less support everything that Obama says. I mean, individuals, representatives, senators, they support it, and then they go in there and they don't make anything happen. And I think a more effective president might have gotten some of these things to happen. I mean, I think like a Harry Truman, the way he pounded some things through. Obama's not a Harry Truman in a practical sense. He's obviously more articulate, but he can't get the deals through Congress.
Well, I think my bias is, my perception of Obama's style is that of a community organizer. I think he came into the presidency from a background in which he got into situations which were strong polarized positions in a neighborhood, in some part of it, they weren't political per se, but they were entrenched, old timers versus newcomers versus the business interests versus the homeless and all that. And his technique was get them all in a room, let them sort of talk for a while. Everybody sort of ended up exhausting themselves, and you piecemealed little solutions. And over time, without actually having to be the one that took somebody by the neck and drugged them into the room, they agreed and came to results. That did not work in Congress, and hasn't worked in Congress, and it isn't going to. But there are some things that his administration seems to agree with the Republicans on. Let's talk about one, like the reforming of corporate tax rates. There's a proposal to both sides, the Democrats and Republicans, and myself. I think corporate tax code should be remodeled, reformed, changed. You think there's a chance that would be one reform that could happen without selling out to the wealthy corporate interests?
I would ask you to define what selling out is. I think that they will get more than their pound of flesh for having their lobbyists agree to let the congressman they own go along with some of these changes. But I think that, for one of the things that I think has happened over the last, pardon me, decade, let's say, is this transfer of wealth overseas. And I think that there is such disgust over that by people that are going to cast votes. I think that the people in Congress can't ignore that. I think the Republicans could see some changes there. And there's several ways they're going to tax it without getting into it. But some of it is that get their assets and their money gets taxed, whether they bring the money back or not. And then that will force them to pay some tax. It wouldn't be as high a rate as it is for corporate earnings here.
We all know that the United States allegedly has a 35% corporate rate, but in fact the actual rate is something like 16%.
Yes.
It's they say it's the highest in the world, but actually the actual tax collected as a percentage of income is one of the lowest in the world. So they already have a pretty good system going. The problem is it's so distorted by these breaks and these loopholes. It would be nice to see, and I would hope that maybe the Democrats could get some progress in this, to get a more honest and above-board tax system in which everybody knew what they were supposed to pay and was held accountable to pay it.
I think there's no hope for such a thing. I think there is hope to pick at the edges. And some of the edges are taxing some of those foreign assets. Now, I didn't write down, and so my memory might be wrong, but I believe Chevron, General Motors, a couple other large corporations paid no.
GE, I think, is the most notorious.
GE paid no income tax.
GE is a hugely profitable corporation.
And
General Motors wasn't for a while. So.
No, it was this last year, but
yeah.
Yes, you're correct. And I think I think even some Republican legislators are offended by that. And so I think there's a chance for that, and that was your original question. I think there's a chance that something will happen there. And then that'll go for infrastructure rebuilding, at least that's the intended use of that money coming in. That would be good. That's going to give us
a job creation.
Yeah, and a lot of those people will be unionized people, so they'll make more than minimum wage. They're going to make decent money. So that's going to help the middle class. That's going to stimulate the economy.
So you think I read a survey that said that Republican Congressmen members were actually supportive of infrastructure expenditures, which I don't recall them being supportive of a few years ago when Obama was pushing for it in his first term.
That's correct. I heard that on the news and read it in the New York Times.
So if that is true, if people can see now the advantage of building an infrastructure that is so corroded and dangerous and inefficient as a business support, also as a job creator, I would think that's a possibility. That could happen. And I think that would be something that Obama would be supportive of. What about immigration? That was hardly really discussed at the State of the Union.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't touched on much at all.
There seems to be at one time a belief that there was a potential reconciliation in that arena.
That's true. I mean, you have people like McCain,
yeah,
who are in favor of that. I did see the number that 645,000 young people are presently protected from deportation. The saber rattlers on the Republican side are saying they're going to rescind that illegal, to their way of
executive order. Yeah.
Executive order. I don't think they'll have the audacity to do that. So I think that's one thing they may be able to resolve these children that had nothing to do with being brought here, and now they're here. So I think there could be some reconciliation in immigration. I think there's a lot of hostility right now, but I think that'll die down in the next few months. Recognizing Cuba along the same lines, I think there's a lot of money,
Oh, the
Republican
Cuba,
money that
yeah,
that they want to recognize Cuba.
the corporate money.
Exactly.
I mean, I've never understood how the Republicans have held it against the manufacturers and the producers and the agricultural people who for 40 years at least have wanted to exploit that market, which is 90 miles away. I mean,
Right.
we will ship stuff around the world, and we can't trade with something that's so close at hand and potentially profitable. So I think there's some chance. I think there'll be sort of phony war over that as it moves along. But I think there's a nod and a wink to Obama and his administration to go ahead and reconcile this issue. So if that's bipartisan, I think that's likely to happen.
The one thing that I'm concerned will not be bipartisan, and I think it is perhaps the biggest issue, is climate change. Yep. And human contribution to climate change.
Well, they just voted 93-8, I think it was, or whatever that number was, that climate change was real.
Oh, with the amendment.
Yeah.
Yes. So there you are.
So they've already
The
on the
answer to our
record.
prayers.
I thought maybe that was the sweet little moment when they out there kumbaya and they everybody got together and agreed that we had been enlightened and understood it. So you don't think that vote counted?
Well, sure, that vote counted.
Okay.
And if they have an added amendment that we should all feel good and be happy, that would have passed too. So how about a thumbs up? I think thumbs up for immigration during these next 2 years.
Yeah.
I think thumbs up for some corporate taxation
reform, I agree with
changes,
that.
not wide, but some. I don't think they're going to get the college tuition, but I would lean slightly hopeful. So my thumb is coming up more than it's coming down on college tuition.
And minimum wage?
And minimum wage, I think that won't. I'd say a thumbs down on that.
Thumbs down on that. I think there's a thumbs up on that. I think a lot of Congress people in district voters
Yeah.
have been very supportive of that, and even some state politicians of their parties, the Republican parties.
Well, that's one where I hope my thumbs down is wrong, because it would be great. I mean, to think that people can live on $20-some thousand a year is ludicrous.
Well, thank you, Hap. This is, I'm not sure that we've resolved anything, but it's sort of fun in a way to hash out and see if there's any reality behind these speeches that we make, these presentations. We'll do it again on another subject soon. Thank you, Ali and Juanita in the back, for your work in the studio. And those of you who want to see this again, I remind you, it's available by Googling The Next Step TV SB and on YouTube or Ustream. And you can watch this show, other shows that we've done. And if you have any questions or thoughts about the show, as often as on the screen, my email is there, glennmaurer@cox.net. Be happy to hear from you. Thanks.